This is Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew, a show dedicated to going back in time to see what the critics said about retro games when they first came out. Every week, we flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Computer and Video Games, Next Generation, and dozens of classic magazines from all around the world, some of which even have ridiculous 1,000-point scales. But what happens when Nintendo announces new games, but there are no reviews to talk about? Well, that's the conundrum we're faced with this week, thanks to the addition of not one, not even two, but three Densetsu no Starfy games that were previously only available in Japan. With no reviews to talk about, what are we gonna do? Well, I guess that's what we're both about to find out in this very different episode of Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew. The first thing you need to know about Starfy is that he is neither a star nor a fish. The second thing you need to know is that he ruled, and his games are legitimate classics that should have been released in the US and Europe a long time ago. These three Densetsu no Starfy games are among the very best platformers released on the Game Boy Advance. And it's just so exciting that millions of Switch owners will finally have a chance to discover the brilliance of this series. On a personal level, I may be disappointed that we don't have a whole lot of reviews to talk about, but literally nobody else should be disappointed about this Nintendo Switch Online announcement. First conceived back in the mid-1990s, Starfy was built around the instruction of making a floaty platformer for Nintendo's aging Game Boy. However, as the developers debated making the lead everything from a jellyfish to Mario in a bubble, production was eventually switched over to the Game Boy Color. It really wasn't until 2002 that the game would eventually show up, now on the Game Boy Advance of all places. It introduced the world to a starry hero that is great on dry land, but even better underwater. With a dash, jump, and spin attack, Starfy isn't all that different from a lot of the other platformers to come out of the 1990s, but the water theme allowed the developers to come up with some really creative level designs that felt wholly different from Mario and Donkey Kong, or even Nintendo's other floaty platforming hero Kirby. Although not exactly the deepest platformer you'll play, Starfy actually has more going on than you might expect. This first installment gives us vehicles to drive, cool extras to unlock, and even a story full of characters you'll need to help. Best of all, the unique levels and gameplay allow for some truly inventive and fun boss fights. This really is a delightful game that gives you everything that you want out of a Nintendo platformer. And if you're only learning about Starfy for the first time this week, well, let me tell you, you're in for a real treat. Unfortunately, because Densetsu no Starfy is only now being released in the US and Europe, there aren't any English language reviews. About the closest we come is Famitsu, which gave it an average score of 7.5 out of 10. It's a shame that we don't have more reviews to look back at. But don't let that hold you back from experiencing Starfy. This is a good start to a great series. While the original Densetsu no Starfy may have taken more than a half-dozen years to finally hit store shelves, the same was not true about the sequel. Released almost exactly 1 year later, Densetsu no Starfy 2 gives you everything that you want from a sequel. It's substantially bigger, with way more stages, including multiple levels inside of each of the worlds. If the first game was a proof of concept for our hero, the sequel shows Starfy coming out kicking and screaming, and also wall jumping and a whole bunch of other new abilities. With a bigger story and far more levels, this really does feel like a proper Starfy follow-up. It takes everything that was great about that first game and it just shoots for the stars. And I like Starfy because officially he's neither a star nor a fish. That's important. The sequel also goes a long way to expand on Starfy's friendship with a clam named Mo, who has a shockingly depressing backstory. There's also Ogura, the villain of the last game, who's back for revenge. Couple that with a brand new selection of mini-games, a picture book, and even the ability to dress up our little hero, and you have one of the best platformers on the Game Boy Advance. Once again, there are no English language reviews for this 2003 sequel. French magazine Total Cube gave the game a score of 15 out of 20. Wait a second, hang on. Does their score go up to 20? Alright, whatever you say. After using a translator, they concluded that exploration is carried out gradually and you regularly acquire new powers to restart the rhythm of the action. There's not much else to say other than the game improves on every aspect of its predecessor. If you want good, classic platforming, look no further. You saw a similar score from another French gaming magazine, Joypad, who gave it a 7 out of 10. Once again, using the power of a translator, Joypad complained the levels are not very large, the enemies offer little resistance, and everything is perhaps too accessible. It's enough to delight the little ones and lightly amuse others. Obviously, I like the game more than a 7 out of 10, but hey, at least that score makes sense. I'm still trying to wrap my head around a 15 out of 20. What does that even mean? I just can't with these magazines. Well, not the final game in the Starfy franchise, this third installment does feel like an ending of a trilogy. It takes everything that worked about the first two games and adds to the formula, giving us a brand new female character named Starly, who, much like her brother, is neither a star nor a fish. That's important to know. She also comes with her own set of moves, including crawling through tight spaces and jumping off of walls. There are also new vehicles to drive and a whole bunch of new bosses to battle, a real highlight of the series. Now, if you're somehow still not sold on the Starfy series, then let me introduce you to World 8. That's when, out of nowhere, Wario shows up and turns this Starfy sequel into his own game. Every single stage in that world has something to do with Wario, often in fun and inventive ways. And even beyond that, there's just a playfulness to the stage designs in this game. This really is the Starfy team at their absolute best, which is probably why it's often regarded as the best game in this entire series. Throw in multiplayer support and a surprisingly emotional story, complete with an absolutely perfect ending, and what you have is a fitting finale to this Game Boy Advance trilogy. Sadly, you're just gonna have to take my word for that. When Famitsu reviewed the game, they gave it an average score of 7.75 out of 10, which is a little bit better than the 7.5 out of 10 they gave the original. Thankfully, Starfy has been uncovered and rediscovered multiple times since its 2004 launch, with Nintendo Life giving the game a perfect score of 10 out of 10 in 2009, and Time Extension calling it one of the best Game Boy Advance games of all time in 2023. Look, I get it. This is not the type of review crew episode that you're used to, but we work with what we have here. Even if all the reviews for this series are either in French or Japanese, the summer is just a perfect time to dive into the Starfy series. It has inventive level designs, cool boss fights, and more charm than it knows what to do with. I just gotta level with you, this Game Boy Advance trilogy is one of the coolest new additions to the Nintendo Switch Online. What a great choice. Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews, or maybe not? Yeah, this is a weird episode. But if you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post episodes kind of like this whenever Nintendo adds retro games to their online service. We have a whole playlist where we look at every single game in the library, so give that a binge when you have a few minutes. Now, here's the question I have for you. Not including Mario, what is your favorite Nintendo platforming hero? Is it Kirby? Donkey Kong? Maybe this episode has made you fall in love with Starfy. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be getting back to our regular schedule next week, including a bunch of reviews that I've just been piling up. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,